Good evening, West Coast Berbice, East Berbice, and of course, right here on the Quarantine Coast, and live on Facebook, all my Facebook friends and followers. Welcome once again to another program of Issues in the News, where we discuss the important events that would have taken place in our country over the last week or so. And as I would normally say, Guyana is a very dynamic society, so that in any given week there are so many new developments and so many new issues which require our discussions. I want to begin where I left off last week to speak about the continued corruption which we are witnessing as a nation daily by the coalition government. You will recall that this is a government, while they were in the opposition, condemned and criticized the PPP on the ground of corruption. In fact, the main plank of their attack, both prior to and during the election campaign, was corruption. It was their major platform. They accused the PPP of corruption of gigantic proportions. When they entered into office, after several months, and being unable to find this mammoth corruption which they spoke about while they were in the opposition, and not being able to show the people and their supporters this vast and voluminous evidence of corruption about which they spoke while they were in opposition, they were very embarrassed, and their supporters became impatient with them. As a result, they launched 45 forensic audits. So the Auditor General report did not present them with the evidence. They, going into office and having absolute control of all the governmental apparatus, machineries, and personnel in office, that did not give them the massive evidence of corruption about which they spoke. Now they employed forensic auditors without the authorization of the Auditor General, an office that the Constitution says must be solely and exclusively responsible for auditing public accounts. And if there is an outside entity that would be tasked with that responsibility, then it is the Auditor General office which must authorize that those audits to take place, throwing all those stipulations aside and all the legal requirements aside. This government chose its own band of forensic auditors, which they handpicked, not by going to any public bidding and any form of accounting process. So the process by which these forensic auditors were appointed is by itself corrupt and is by itself lacking in transparency and accountability. But they chose them, and they chose persons of their own likings, and persons who were during the elections campaign and prior to that had joined with them in criticizing the policy spoke about, while on a number of occasions conceding that the forensic audits did not create the type of evidence and did not unearth the type of evidence capable of founding charges. They couldn't send it to the police force because they got the same response from the police force. So what they did, they converted SOCU, an agency that was supposed to investigate money laundering and terrorism and drug trafficking and gun runnings, those types of offenses, SOCU was supposed to be investigating. And they converted SOCU as a tool, as a political tool, to carry out investigations based upon these forensic audits and to come up with charges. And that is all that SOCU has been doing over the last year or so. They brought in advisors from the United Kingdom to help SOCU contrive, concoct, and fabricate these charges. Significantly, SOCU is funded from the Office of the President's budget, no other than the head of the Presidential Secretariat, Mr. Joseph Harman, admitted that much in the National Assembly during one of the budget debates. And significantly, there are officers of the Office of the President who are placed permanently in SOCU's office, overseeing what is going on. And all of the persons who have been detained by SOCU officers in SOCU office can testify to the fact that ministers of the government, including the Attorney General, keep calling SOCU on an hourly almost basis, giving directions and giving instructions on who to charge, how to charge, and how investigations should be conducted. It is against that background that we have been seeing these charges emerge. And what are the charges? Stealing of law books, which is part of my contractual entitlement, as you would have heard me explain on so many occasions. Just a week or so ago, I got confirmation from the book company in London that the government of Guyana never ordered books from them, never subscribed for books from them, at least those books, even during the period while I was there or thereafter. And that the government of Guyana never purchased or ordered books. That is, books that they are talking about were ordered by me and have been part of an arrangement which I have with that company for the past 15 or more years. Yet, they contrived and concoct a charge of larceny by bail against me. I don't want to discuss how weak the charge is because, they may be listening to the program. But I can promise you, as I have done before, that that charge will be disposed of in due course. Now you see 6 directors of GRDB, including two MPs of the People's Progressive Party, being slapped with criminal charges. And what are the charges? The charge that they have instituted against these 6 members of the board relate to and is connected with the omission to insert a particular transaction into a general ledger held by the GRDB in accordance with some standard operations procedure. That is the charge. A clerical function of not recording the transaction in some ledger. Not that $1 is missing. Not that somebody took money and converted it to their own use. Not that there is some fraud of $1 or $10 or $1 million. No money is missing. No money is alleged to be missing. No money is alleged to be stolen. No money is alleged to be appropriated wrongly. No money is alleged to be converted fraudulently. But these people did not enter. They are charged with not entering this thing in this register. These are non-executive directors. They are on a board sitting, determining the policy direction of this organization. It is not, and it cannot be their function to make entries into ledger. That is obviously the function of a clerk or an accounting technician, or at its highest, the accountant. It cannot even reach the level of the manager. Significantly, the board is a 15-member board, but only 6 persons have been charged. There are many people who are on that board. For example, Mr. John Tracy, formerly CEO of GBTI Bank. There is Dr. David de Groot, a veterinary officer, and many other persons who have not been charged. But the 6 persons who have been charged are persons who either are connected with the People's Progressive Party or are perceived to have some connection with the People's Progressive Party. And that is the truth. No matter how you twist it and turn it, that is the truth. And the charge has an element to it. When you read the section under which the charge was filed, the section says that the omission to insert this transaction, or the omission to enter this transaction into the register, must have been done with an intent to defraud. There is no allegation of any fraud being committed in this particular project. In fact, the accounting records would show, and are showing, that every single cent that was disbursed from an international agency in relation to this project to the Rice Board was spent for the purpose that it was discharged. That the project itself and the Rice Board has been audited by a chartered accountant company under the supervision of the Auditor General's office. And those accounts have been examined by the Public Accounts Committee in the Parliament at the time when this government was in the opposition, and therefore they had chairmanship of that committee. And you know that in the 10th Parliament they had a majority of people on that committee, or members of that committee. And in that configuration, that committee, the Public Accounts Committee, scrutinized these very accounts and found no wrongdoing. Now, they have brought these charges where not a single cent is missing. And that is why we are saying that these charges have nothing to do with criminality, illegality, or wrongdoing. They have to do with a political vengeance, a political witch hunting strategy, and the criminal system being used as a weapon to silence the opposition. Today, we saw another exemplification and incarnation of this plan. Today, we saw another charge being instituted against the Registrar of Deeds, Azina Baksh. Azina Baksh is a lawyer. Azina Baksh, instead of going into private practice, where a lot of money apparently can be made, chose as a lawyer to serve the state and work for a salary. Azina Baksh worked under me as Attorney General. Azina Baksh's remuneration package was approved as an entity, as a whole, by the cabinet of the government of Guyana. Because Azina Baksh, agency in which he worked, used to be what is called a central government agency. But as Attorney General, I took an act to the Parliament which was supported unanimously by the then opposition, who controlled a majority in that very Parliament. and removed that central government agency from that status and created a statutory body corporate to be run by a board of which Azina Baksh continued to function as Registrar of Deeds and as CEO of that entity. A very broad-based board runs that place. We hired an expert to transition these workers from public servants into contract employees. And everyone received a remuneration package which was individually negotiated with them, every single employee, including Azina Baksh, and approved by Cabinet, by extension, the Ministry of Finance, who had to bear the first wage bill of this new entity until it starts to function. Azina Baksh never paid herself any sum of money. She was paid based upon a package which was agreed upon and approved by her subject minister as well as the cabinet of the government of Guyana at the time. Yet they have dragged Azina Baksh to CID headquarters over the past few weeks. She is in an advanced state of pregnancy. Basil Williams has been shutting her out of her office and denying her the opportunity to discharge her statutory duties and obligations, locking her out of the office, keeping away official documents from her, subjecting her to tremendous stress and pressure. And then they started, when they realized that she will not buckle, they started this fraud investigation. Significantly, the Registrar of Deeds is a creature of the Constitution of Guyana, and the Constitution of Guyana provides that it is the Judicial Service Commission, not the Attorney General, who appoints the Registrar of Deeds. Therein lies Mr. Basil Williams' problems, because he wants to dismiss her, and he cannot dismiss her because the Constitution says that she is to be appointed by the JSC, disciplined by the JSC, and dismissible only by the JSC. So he couldn't dismiss her. So what he did instead is to concoct and fabricate this charge so that he can get rid of her by charging her with a criminal offense. Mind you, it doesn't matter whether they will lose in the end. That is not his concern, because he believes that when the lawsuits start to come for malicious prosecution, people will be suing him in his official capacity. Well, no, they will not be. People will be advised to sue him personally, so that the state will not have to be burdened with compensation to these victims. Because no person can shelter under the cloak of the state when they go on a frolic of their own and carry out their own vendetta and vindictive actions that are outside what the law recognizes as legitimate and legal. So we will cross that hurdle when we get to it. So Azina Baksh has been charged with obtaining money by false pretenses. And the money that they are claiming that she obtained is her gratuity every 6 months, because she is not a pensionable employee. She was employed by a contract. Every 6 months she is entitled to a gratuity, as thousands of Guyanese are. And because she was paid that gratuity, Azina Baksh does not pay herself. The Registrar of Deeds doesn't have the authority to pay him or herself. The Act, the Deeds and Commercial Registry Authority Act, provides a procedure in the Act by which employees are paid. Azina Baksh was paid in accordance with that procedure. But their contention is that she is not entitled to the gratuity, so they charge her. So you'll find now what is taking place is that these minor, trivial, obscure, ridiculous and ludicrous charges are being pelted at people left, right and center to embarrass them, to break their spirit, to get rid of them when they can be dismissed. And that is the new policy that we are seeing unfolding by this administration. Law and order, the rule of law, the constitutional protection and legal protection that are afforded persons in their jobs are all kicked aside. And there's a hatchet mentality that we are coming for you. If we can't knock you off, then we are going to charge you with something in order to get rid of you. Because when they charge you, you know, there is a standing operational procedure that you should not continue in your employment. And of course, that is their tactic and strategy. On the other hand, look at their performance and you will see that the Treasury is losing every day or every week billions and billions of dollars through their incompetence, through their dishonesty, through corruption, and through disregard for the law and the legal processes which the law lays down. So, we have Mr. Harman saying that over $200 million was spent on the inauguration ceremony at the stadium when the government took office. Mr. Harman said over $200 million was spent. However, not a single cent, he said, came from the Treasury. That $200 million was donated. Now, I know that these people believe that we are stupid. But, you know, it takes us to another level when they're going to tell you these things. $200 million donated by whom? And accepting donations like that is by itself an act capable of being labeled a corrupt act when there is no accountability. And these people are so blissful, they are so ignorant about these things that they say them nonchalantly and they say them, you know, without even understanding the implications. So this learned gentleman stands up and tells the nation that 200 million were received from random people just pouring in donation because they just love this government. In public law and in public accountability, every time you get a donation, there is a presumption that you have to do something in public office. That donations don't come just like that. And that is why the law is very suspicious about donations. We ask in the Parliament for a list of the donors and what they donated or how much they donated. They have never produced that. They have never produced it because it's a lie. And that is why a few months after Miss Nicolette Henry, either by error or perhaps stupidity, disclosed in the National Assembly that some $70 million were spent on inauguration during one of the budget debates when we had Committee of Supplies and she was being cross-examined or examined on her expenditure that she brought for approval. And when she was being examined and being questioned, it slipped out that some $70 or some $1 million like that was for the inauguration ceremony. So that was basically stolen from the treasury and paid for that exercise. I fast forward to Durban Park. We were told again that this is a project where Guyanese will exhibit their patriotism and their nationalism, and they will donate by the millions. What happened? A project that they said would cost $500 million ended up costing, by their own estimates, $1.5 billion. We in the PPP estimated the cost over $2 billion, but by their own estimates, they said it cost $1.5 billion. This project has not yet been audited. Not a single piece of work, according to them, which total value is $1.5 billion, not a single piece of this work ever went to public tendering in accordance with the Procurement Act, which says that anything over $500,000 Guyana must go to tendering unless it is being sole sourced in accordance with that act. Here you have a $1.5 billion being just paid out without a single bid going to tender. But let us stick to the donation story, because that is their story, that it was donated. We ask again, produce a list of the donors and how much they are owed and how much they donated. You know what they brought to the parliament? A list of creditors, a list of people that they owe and that they have to pay. And they came to the parliament and withdrew $500 million to pay out of that project. Another free project. And then the Minister of Finance tell the rest of the people who have not been paid, because that $500 million was not sufficient. They had pumped a lot of money in the budget itself to do this work, about $500 million. Although they've begun by telling us that it's all going to be built by donation. About $500 million was put into the budget, and then another $500 million was applied for by way of supplementary provisions by Minister Patterson and paid out. And still, that was not enough. And the Minister of Finance said to the persons who have not been paid, go to hell. You either take this or rise it. That is the approach of this government. So that's wastage number 2. Nobody getting charged for these things. But you're charging people with $2,000 law books. Are you charging a woman for her salary, her remuneration package? Then come to their salary. Did they ever promise anyone that they're going to increase their salary by 50% during the campaign? No. While they were in office, the news had broke. There was a disclosure in the press that they are going to pay themselves 50% increase in salary. Mr. Raphael Trotman came out and denounced the publication in the newspapers as wicked, saying that the coalition will never do that. They will never pay themselves 50% increase in salaries. Lo and behold, about 2 months after, in a very obscure section of the official gazette, there was a publication which is required to be done by law of an increase in salary for the entire cabinet, whereby their salary was increased by 50%. So Ramjatan, etc., gets over $1 million now. Nobody getting charged for that. Azina Baksh is getting charged for her 2 cents gratuity. 27 people being paid an increase in salary, and that is in addition to all the other benefits which they have. And the salary is not all. Each of those salaries will result in a pension that is 7/8 of each of those salaries. So, our beloved Prime Minister, he will end up with about $1.5 million in pension for the rest of his life. And when he dies, his wife, I think, is entitled to half of that pension until she dies. So it's not now money we're talking about. It's money that are to be paid in the future. Nobody getting charged for that. And this is a recurrent expense. Every month, these monies have to be paid. This is billions spinning. Nobody getting charged for that. But you're charging Hazina Baksh for gratuity. And you're charging somebody for $2,000 law books. And it doesn't end there. We'll just fast forward and deal with the $100 or $200 million cleanup of Georgetown. Again, we were told that this is a voluntary patriotic exercise. But $200 million or more dollars have been spent. I think $1 billion, I think that they said were spent. Mr. Brian Tiwari said he wanted payment. That when he came out to do the work, it was not voluntary. That his equipment were used. And so people started to come up with different excuses to get money. So the lies of the administration continue. Up to last week or last month, earlier this month, where we learned that 2.2 billion, I repeat the figure because it's humongous, $2.2 billion of monies, taxpayers' monies, were spent to procure drugs and pharmaceutical for the public health system without a single public bidding being done. 2.2 billion being spent illegally. Nobody still being charged, but Hazina Baksh is being charged for her gratuity. And another person being charged for failing to, 6 other persons, for failing to record something in a register, but a cent is not missing. And here it is, 2.2 billion is spent on the drugs are not around. That's the other thing. Every hospital you go, there is a shortage. Every medical facility to which you go, there is a shortage of drugs. So where is the $2.2 billion in drugs? One transaction, we were told that the minister spent $602 million. $602 million of drugs purchased upon the direction of the minister, instructions of the minister, purchased from Ansa Macau. And we are told that we got a freezer and an arch, value $20 million in return. 6.2 $100 million. $602 million of drugs. We are told that that's only half. That the drugs that were actually purchased was valued just over $300 million. But $602 million was paid for it because we were told it was wanted for emergency purposes. And it had to be air freighted into the country. But I am saying to you that the plane that brought it in did not value $300 million. But we paid an extra $300 million to bring it into the country quickly. These are all public, these are all facts. Facts that are being reported in all the newspapers, excepting of course Kaichor News. All the other newspapers are reporting these things, but not Kaichor News. Kaichor News is still stuck in the past. It is still, because of course Kaichor News aided and abetted the coalition government when they were spreading this propaganda that the PPP was corrupt and was swimming in a pool of a cesspit of overwhelming corruption the Kaieteur News was very much there, being a mouthpiece of the then opposition. So it has lost its credibility unless it can continue that level of application to show that the PPP is indeed corrupt and that level of corruption did in fact take place. So Kaieteur News has to continue or else it will lose its credibility. But that's a matter for another discourse. But I want to continue in the path that I'm going. About corruption now. Today's papers, look at it, or yesterday's papers, look at it, and you will see another massive scandal unearthed in the Public Accounts Committee by MP Bishop Ejil and MP Irfan Ali, the chairman and vice chairman respectively, of the Public Accounts Committee. They have discovered that luxury vehicles were purchased by the Prime Minister or for the Prime Minister by the Office of the President by not complying with the required process. That the monies were paid in advance by 1 year and the vehicles were not bought. And that there was no tendering again, that the vehicles were simply single sourced. And there was nothing special about the vehicles that would have qualified them for single sourcing. That they were all purchased from one company. And then another 20 or 30 odd $1 million of luxury vehicles, which do not include the Prime Minister's personal custom-made Land Cruiser, which when it came into the country duty-free was valued at $22 million. Duty-free and tax-free, it was $22 million. That is over 100,000 US for the Prime Minister's custom-made Land Cruiser. We're not talking about that. We're talking about some other luxury vehicles and a motorcycle. That must have been for the outrider. And then, of course, we heard again at or from the Public Accounts Committee that another set of millions have been paid to an American company that is bankrupt, paid in advance for the supply of closed-circuit camera. Closed-circuit camera for the Ministry of the Presidency. $20 million paid in advance. No security bond. Nothing being held and now the company gone. So $20 million just gone. Nobody getting charged. Nobody being investigated. But a senior batch being charged for gratuity. Somebody getting charged for not putting down something in some book, and another person getting charged for $2,000 law books. And billions are hemorrhaging every day from the Treasury. Up to now, their friend and crony Larry Singh continues to receive $14 million a month for a house in Albistown, which the government has rented to store condoms and lubricants. 14 million or 70,000 US dollars a month to rent a house in Albistown, which is being used by the Ministry of Health to store condoms and lubricants. Cabinet said that they will rescind the contract. A year has passed, but the gravy train continues to run. Larry Singh continues to get 14 million. Every 10 months is 140 million. Every 10 months is 140 million. Somebody getting kickback somewhere along the line. And nobody getting charged for that. That is the most expensive piece of rental I believe, in the entire Caribbean, if not the world, having regard to the size of the place. It's a wood house, and where it is located, etc., etc. Any house or any building of that size in that very location would be rented for less than $170,000 Ghanaian dollars. Less than that. Less than that. The government is paying $14 million, and nobody going to jail, and nobody getting charged for that. And that's $14 million a month. Multiply, divided by days, divided by 30, and you will see what a day they are paying. What a day they are paying. Nearly $700,000 per day they are paying to rent a house in our Boys Town to store condoms and lubricants. And we can continue, and I can continue to speak for another hour of these types of abuses that are taking place every day by ministers of the government, by permanent secretaries, and by other high functionaries. But nobody is being charged. No one is being investigated. But Azina Baksh is charged for her gratuity, and someone else is charged for failing to enter a transaction, a perfunctory transaction, into a register, and another person is charged for law books. That is the kind of society that we are living in. I want to switch a little to sugar, to share with you that if you read the newspapers, you would have learned that despite all the assurances that the coalition government gave in relation to IFLOT estate, we are told now that IFLOT estate will soon be closed. That IFLOT estate will soon be closed. That will put another 1,900 to 2,000 people directly employed on the red line. Multiply that by 4 and you get nearly 80,000 people. 8,000, 19 by 4. Yeah, you get thousands of people who are going to be put on the red line because their mother or their father or the income earner of that family of 4 will no longer have a job because this government is closing IFLOT estate. And this government assured the workers of Wales, when they were closing Wales, assured the workers and guaranteed the workers that they will get jobs at IFLOT, or they can opt for their severance package to which they are entitled by law. Now we are told that IFLOT can't be sustained anymore and will be closed. So when they tell you that Blairmont will not be closed, and which other one, Rose Hall or Albion will not be closed, you can't believe them. You can't believe them. The grand plan is to close all the estates. To close all the estates. We will now go to the phones. Hi, caller, you're on the air. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Palmyra.
Palmyra, yes. Proceed.
Good night. If the road on estate goes down, as a person driving cars on the road, we will some dates of any passengers know when they are traveling what happens?
Not only car drivers or taxi drivers, but
Others and buyers.
everyone else. The lady in the market, the stores at New Amsterdam, the banks, because there will be no money to bank,
I know.
the marketplaces, the vendors,
Everything.
every single thing. The economy of Region 6
Yes.
will simply be destroyed because over 80%
Yes.
of the economy of this region
If you can, it's a
rotates around
Yes.
the estates here.
Before you start before you go, I just want to ask you one question.
Yes.
When we get back in 2020, and the situation that we have on the election, and the identity will still go ahead in the area of the station. And if you do find out that the greater or the coalition government is a fraud, I don't think that we deserve under the law any benefit as a president and Mr. Namajuki.
All right, that's an interesting point. That's an
I
interesting
think
point.
that you the biggest point is at least I now wondering
Mm.
I last election that they last election
Uh-huh.
and he obviously becomes the president legally because he may be next to the authority of the president.
No, I understand the point. And it's a very it's a very interesting point, right? But it's not as straightforward as you think. Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you. Very intelligent caller has pointed me to an important issue that I will have to reflect upon. So, the phone lines are going. Caller, you're on the air. Could you speak up? Remember, the audience needs to hear you too. Yeah, I heard you said good night, but I don't think anybody else is hearing you. Why the reason for closing the estate? Well, they are telling, the reason that they are giving is that there is not sufficient fiscal space, that's the word that they're using, to sustain the estates. And we are saying that neither can you afford, first of all, we don't accept the argument, or caller, thank you, let me explain. First of all, we don't accept the argument that there is no fiscal space. We believe that if you cut down this wastage, the criminal wastages, the payment of 6 point something million US dollars on the mere writing of a letter to a friendly contractor, and you don't pay Rhodesia the judgment, but instead audit Rhodesia for the amount of money that they owe this government through under-invoicing, as they admittedly did in the witness box at the CCJ, and you do not write off $80 billion in taxes to DDL, and you don't waste $1.5 billion in building a white elephant with wood just to sport and raise flag at Durban Park, and you don't hire 3 private jets to go and visit and see the opening of an airport in St. Vincent, and you don't rent a house in Albistown for $14 million a month. You can save a lot of money which can go into that suku. So we don't accept the argument that there is no fiscal space. And then we are asking you to consider the destruction that will take place when the estates are closed. Follow your ear. We missed that call. The thousands of people that will be without jobs. Follow your ear. Now you have to lower your television volume. Hello? We missed that caller. Caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, good night, Mr. Nanda.
Good night. Where are you calling me from?
I want to ask a question. Have you considered that you study long in industry, in the industry, and they get a true lead?
Yes, caller? That caller was cut off for some reason. So, These people are only taking into account how much money they are spending in the industry. They're not looking at the other side. What benefits are accruing to the country from the expenditure of those funds. Caller, you're in the air. Good night. I'm alright. Uh-huh. The company gone missing, that they pay the money to. Yeah. Why should somebody not go to jail for that? Yeah, right. But that's the point I'm making. Mm-hmm. No, in fact, he has come, apparently his mandate is to just close the place. I don't know if you're closing every day or every month you're closing a different estate, what do you need manager for? None of the estates working. Anyway, caller, thank you, caller. They're not taking into account, although Gaisupu is running at a loss, the contribution Gaisupu is making to the GDP, the contribution it is making to foreign exchange, the wages and so on that are being paid to the workers, how much taxes are going back into the treasury, how much VAT they are collecting when these workers spend their monies, how much jobs are being created, and how much cyclical benefits that this money is being creating when it is being spent. None of these things are taken into account. Yes, caller, you're here. Good night.
I think there is some of that news, right?
Uh-huh.
And
The doctor that? Do what? Uh-huh. I'm not sure. I would have left.
What I think about like to go that the right? That we got the plans to settle and we can know it. Right? And I feel that this people just people to believe and we want to add it 100%. This morning we are doing morning. Right? When we are doing.
Uh-huh.
Then after the one today, they must spend the money away.
All right. The rent the house that is the smaller than your house. Okay. Right. Well, thank you, caller. Thank you. The caller has raised a number of issues, but importantly, he has ended with the emphasis that we need to get more people out on the streets to continue to protest against the closure of these estates, or else they will all be closed. And when they are closed, I really don't have an idea. I really don't have an idea what will happen in this country. Caller, you're on the air.
Good night.
Good night. Where are you calling me from, sir?
I come from West Berbice.
West Berbice. Yeah,
West Berbice.
yes.
These guys, they are crazy guys. They told me, I said, you have got like Gaza, and when I said, they are wrong. I told you. Because what you going to get? A shooter will go to
All right, caller. All right, good. Thank you. The caller is saying when they close the estate, what people will do? People will go and plant ganja. That's a strong possibility. Caller, you're on the air. But where are you calling me from? The Edward, yes.
spending of government what we do, legislative taken away from what they're reacting.
Yeah.
Very quite good topic.
Yeah.
So, for $8 million extended cover, 3 warrant loans at a cost of $300,000.
Chief, your tree wardrobe cost 300,000. I am telling you that ministers are leaving their houses, their homes, and they are living in rental houses that the government is paying 500,000 to $1 million for one. And there is one particular minister who rent his house to an advisor of the government. So the government paying him rent for his house, which he rent to one of his friends, who is an advisor to the government. And he moved into a house that the government paying rent for his house now, the new house that he moved into, at a rate of 1.5 million per month. You understand what I'm telling you?
Yeah, instead of $2 million, and no matter what the government here said, you got to be bigger. And most of us will not be the final one. And final way to $100,000 is what people rate this money there.
How much for a microwave in Rosal?
I mean, if you're going about to get this family, see, you get 20, you get 40.
Yes.
But this one, like you don't put it in and everything, and you cook by yourself.
Well, boss, remember during the election campaign, Nagamutu said that he will never travel first class, that he has never traveled first class, that he tells Jagan to take the money and go and buy a pipeline and put it to the people at Gwim to get water. You remember that?
Yeah.
Nagamutu today flies around with his family in the whole first class section. And he drives around in Georgetown in a Land Cruiser that is valued $22 million, duty and tax free. That is over 100,000 US. And that is without duty and taxes. Custom made in Japan. You understand?
Yeah.
So that I gone beyond the stage of that these people fool people. I think everybody know. The sugar workers who are promised 25%, the rice farmers who are promised $9,000 a bag. I mean, every single major promise that they have made to this country, they have violated and breached. They have fooled everyone. You understand? Even their own supporters. People who voted for them are lamenting whole day how they have been fooled. You understand? Right. So, I passed that stage of how they have fooled people. It is, they are, a pack of all right, caller, thank you. We'll take 2 more calls before I say goodbye because I have to wrap up now. The operator is signaling me frantically. Caller, you're in the air. Hello, caller? We missed that caller, so one final call before I take my leave. And caller, you're in the air? Yes, sir. Where you calling me from? Blackbush. What part? Miami Curie. But sir, we said, and I've said it so many times, that these people did not only raise taxes, but they raised every single public licenses fees and fees for the issuance of all public documents. Over 200 increases, each over 600%. You understand? If a registration for a car used to be some, $20, now it's a couple $1,000. Driver license, everything. And yet, they don't have money to give to Gaisuku. They put VAT on water, VAT on electricity. They're collecting extra billions and billions. but they'll blow it out and sport it out, fly around the world, gone to sleep in somewhere in the Middle East. You saw the president sleeping? Right? So that's what's going on. Private jets and so are being hired. You understand? These people are living a life that they never expected they would be able to live. But though they don't care about Barbish, they will not come. Nagamoto comes to Barbies, he goes to his brother, and he goes to the Kalimai church and he goes back to Georgetown. Can't face anybody. Alright, Dollar. Thank you. Thank you. We have had a very lively, interactive program, but this is where I have to say goodbye. The phones are ringing, but my operator has signaled to me that program time is here. So, please have a great week. It was a pleasure being with you and my Facebook friends. Please join me again next Tuesday when we resume this important discussion. Thank you and good evening. Have a great week. Thank you.